364,000 viewers. On the same Saturday night, one show pulled in 364,000 viewers. Another pulled in 24.5 million. And here's the thing, they were competing for the exact same audience at the exact same time. Today, we're breaking down what happened to AEW Collision on June 13, 2026, specifically why the numbers cratered so hard, what the NBA Finals had to do with it, and what this moment actually tells us about where wrestling sits in the TV landscape right now. By the end of this, you'll understand the full picture behind those numbers and why the story is more complicated than it first looks. I've got someone here who has been deep in the ratings data all week, so let's get into it. Walk me through what actually happened on June 13.
So June 13 was a Saturday, and AEW Collision aired its summer blockbuster special on TNT. According to Programming Insider, which is the source that Wrestlenomics and basically every wrestling ratings outlet uses, Collision drew 364,000 viewers that night.
364,000. And the week before?
496,000. So that's a drop of over 130,000 viewers in a single week. And in the key 1849 demographic, which is the one advertisers care most about, Collision went from a 0.08 rating down to a 0.04. That's a 50% drop in the demo in 7 days.
Okay, so that's a significant fall. But before we get into why, can you just set the scene a little? What is AEW Collision, for anyone who isn't deep in the wrestling world?
Sure. AEW Collision is All Elite Wrestling's Saturday night show on TNT. It also simulcasts on HBO Max, which is an important detail we'll come back to. The June 13 episode was branded the Summer Blockbuster Special. It was a taped show, not a live one, and it ran 2.5 hours, which is longer than a standard episode.
Wait, it was taped, not live?
Taped. And that matters. TPWW specifically noted that the June 13 show was taped and not live, which is a distinction worth flagging because live events tend to create a sense of urgency. You want to watch in real time because anything can happen. A pre-recorded special doesn't have that same pull.
So you've got a taped show going up against what exactly?
Game 5 of the NBA Finals. New York Knicks versus the San Antonio Spurs. And not just any Game 5, the championship clinching game. The Knicks won 94-90 and captured their first NBA title since 1973. That's 53 years without a championship.
53 years? That's a generational thing. Like, most people watching that game were not alive the last time the Knicks won.
Exactly. And the numbers reflect that. According to The Hollywood Reporter, Game 5 averaged 24.5 million viewers on ABC and ESPN, and it peaked at 33 million viewers watching the closing minutes. 33 million people watching the end of that game.
Fine, that is a staggering number. Like, to put that in perspective, Collision had 364,000. The NBA Finals peaked at 33 million. That's not even the same conversation.
It really isn't. And the scale of the NBA Finals this year was genuinely historic. The Hollywood Reporter reported that the full series averaged 20.6 million viewers across all 5 games, the biggest NBA Finals audience since 1998. That was Michael Jordan's last championship with the Chicago Bulls.
So this wasn't just a big sports night, this was a once-in-a-generation sports night.
Right. And the Hollywood Reporter also noted that the 2026 Finals doubled last year's average of 10.27 million viewers. So the NBA's audience literally doubled year over year. Part of that is the Knicks being from the country's largest media market, but part of it is also a new media rights deal that's been driving NBA viewership up across the board.
Okay, so let's talk about the Collision side of this more. The week before, June 6, they had 496,000 viewers. That was actually a strong week for them, right?
It was a genuinely good week. Wrestlenomics, pulling from Programming Insider data, confirmed that the June 6 episode was 29% above Collision's trailing 4-week average of 384,000 viewers. Wrestling Inc. reported it was the highest viewership Collision had earned in its regular Saturday night time slot since the Grand Slam Australia special back in February.
So they were on a bit of a roll going into June 13.
They were trending upward. The 1849 demo on June 6 was also 33% above the trailing 4-week average. So the momentum was real. And then the NBA Finals just absorbed the Saturday night audience completely.
Is this a one-time thing, though? Or is this a pattern for Collision when it goes up against big sports?
It's very much a pattern. F4W1UON reported back in late April 2026 that Collision took a hit against NBA and NHL playoff games, dropping 16.1% from the prior week down to 397,000 viewers. That report described it as, quote, a familiar refrain, pro wrestling ratings taking hits against sports competition.
A familiar refrain. That's a pretty telling phrase.
It is. And that April episode also finished tied for 58th on the primetime cable charts that night. So it's not like Collision is immune to this. It's a recurring vulnerability whenever major live sports are on.
Let me ask you something, though, and I think this is actually underreported. Collision was also on HBO Max that night, right? So the 364,000 number, is that the full picture?
No, it's not. And this is genuinely important. eWrestling News specifically noted that AEW Collision was simulcast on HBO Max, but streaming viewership figures from HBO Max have not been released. So the 364,000 number only reflects the traditional television audience on TNT.
So there could be a meaningful chunk of viewers watching on streaming that we're just not counting.
Potentially, yes. Fightful also flagged this. They noted that numbers from HBO Max are simply not available. So when people look at 364,000 and call it a collapse, they're working with incomplete data. The TNT number is what it is, but the full audience picture is still unknown.
That's a really important caveat that I feel like gets lost in the conversation.
It does. And there's another layer to this that's worth understanding. The way TV ratings are even measured has changed significantly. Wrestling Attitude has been tracking this. Starting in October 2025, Nielsen rolled out a new system called Big Data plus Panel TV.
What does that actually mean in practice?
So, the old system used a panel of households to estimate viewership. The new system blends that with data from 45 million households and 75 million devices, smart TVs, cable boxes from Comcast, Dish, DirecTV, Roku, Vizio. Nielsen's CEO called it, quote, a landmark moment for TV ratings and the most accurate measurement in the history of television.
Okay, but what does that do to wrestling numbers specifically?
Here's the thing. Unlike the old panel system, the new approach tracks every channel change. So brief tune-outs now count as viewer losses. And co-viewing in homes, bars, or gyms counts less. Wrestling Attitude noted that this makes total ratings appear lower even if actual viewership hasn't declined. So some of what looks like a drop might be a measurement artifact.
So the numbers might look worse than the reality on the ground.
Potentially. The old panel system was noted to sometimes overstate audiences, especially for wrestling. The new system corrects for that. So you're comparing apples and slightly different apples when you look at year-over-year data now.
Okay, so let's zoom out a bit. We've got a taped wrestling special going up against a historic NBA championship game measured by a new rating system that may undercount wrestling audiences with streaming numbers that aren't even public. That's a lot of context.
It really is, and I think the framing of viewership collapse is a bit dramatic when you lay all of that out. The drop is real, 27% in total viewers, 50% in the demo week over week. Those are significant numbers, but the context matters enormously.
Let's talk about the year-over-year comparison, though, because TPWW actually pulled that data. How does June 13, 2026 compare to the same period last year?
So TPWW noted that on June 11, 2025, Collision drew 397,000 viewers and a 0.09 demo rating. And on June 15, 2025, it drew 431,000 viewers and a 0.13 rating. So the June 13, 2026 number of 364,000 and a 0.04 demo is below those 2025 benchmarks.
But last year's NBA finals were a very different situation, right? The 2025 finals averaged what?
The Hollywood Reporter reported that the 2026 finals doubled last year's average of 10.27 million viewers. So in 2025, the finals were drawing around 10 million. In 2026, they were drawing over 20 million. The competition Collision faced this year was dramatically more intense than what it faced in 2025.
So you can't really do a clean year-over-year comparison because the competitive environment was completely different.
Exactly. And that's the thing about live sports. When they're historic, they pull viewers from everywhere. The Knicks winning their first title in 53 years, Jalen Brunson scoring 45 points in the clinching game and being named Finals MVP, that's appointment television for people who don't even normally watch basketball.
Right, casual fans tune in for moments like that. People who haven't watched a game all season suddenly care when it's a championship.
And the numbers back that up. The Hollywood Reporter noted that the third game in a row drew more than 20 million viewers. The last time that happened was 2016, during the Cavaliers' comeback against the Warriors. This was genuinely a cultural event, not just a sports event.
Let me push back on something, though. Even accounting for all of this context, the historic NBA Finals, the taped format, the measurement changes, is 364,000 viewers on a Saturday night a number AEW can be comfortable with long term?
That's the real question, isn't it? And honestly, no. 364,000 is not a number you want to be posting regularly. But the key word is regularly. This was a specific, extraordinary circumstance. The week before, they had 496,000. The trailing 4-week average heading into June was 384,000. So 364,000 in this context is an outlier, not a trend.
Although wrestling headlines did describe it as back-to-back declines, so it wasn't just one bad week.
Fair point. Wrestling headlines specifically said back-to-back declines were the story. So the June 6 number of 496,000 was itself down from something higher. The trend line isn't perfectly clean, but the June 13 drop is still clearly tied to the NBA Finals competition more than anything else.
Let's talk about the broader wrestling landscape for a second, because Wrestlenomics had some other numbers from around the same time that give context. Like, how is Collision doing relative to other wrestling shows?
So Wrestlenomics reported that in early June 2026, AEW Dynamite on TBS drew 638,000 viewers with a 0.11 demo rating. WWE SmackDown on USA drew 1,089,000 viewers with a 0.24 demo. WWE NXT on CW drew 548,000 viewers. So Collision at 364,000 is at the lower end of the wrestling TV landscape, but it's also on Saturday nights, which is historically a harder night to program.
Saturday nights are tough. People are out, they're doing things.
Exactly. And the simulcast on HBO Max is part of how AEW is trying to address that, giving people the option to watch on streaming if they're not in front of a TV, which is why the missing HBO Max numbers are so frustrating from an analysis standpoint.
It's like trying to grade a test when half the answers are missing.
That's a good way to put it. You can see the TNT number clearly. The streaming number is just not there. And in 2026, streaming is not a small thing. That's where a significant portion of viewing happens.
So what does this all add up to? Like, if you're AEW looking at these numbers the morning after, what's the actual takeaway?
I think the honest takeaway is that Saturday night live sports competition is a structural problem for Collision, not a one-off. F4W Dwamyoen called it a familiar refrain back in April. It happened again in June. When the NBA or NHL playoffs are on, Collision bleeds viewers. That's a scheduling reality AEW has to navigate.
And the June 13 situation was the most extreme version of that because the competition was historically massive.
Right. You're not going to beat 24.5 million viewers. Nobody is. The question is whether you can hold your core audience, and the answer on June 13 was that a meaningful chunk of even Collision's regular viewers chose the Knicks.
Which, honestly, is kind of understandable. If you're a casual wrestling fan and the Knicks are about to win their first title in 53 years, you're probably watching the Knicks.
Completely understandable. And that's the thing about live sports. They create moments that feel irreplaceable in real time. Wrestling is also live, but a championship-clinching game has a different kind of cultural gravity, especially for a franchise like the Knicks with that kind of drought.
The Hollywood Reporter mentioned the peak of 33 million viewers for the closing minutes. That's people who tuned in specifically to watch the end of the game. That's appointment viewing at its most intense.
33 million for the closing minutes. To put that in perspective, that's nearly 100 times the audience Collision had that same night. And those 33 million people were all locked in at the same moment. That kind of collective experience is rare in modern television.
It's almost a different category of television event.
It is. And the NBA's growth this year was across the board. The Hollywood Reporter noted that regular season games on ABC, ESPN, NBC, Peacock, and Prime Video grew 16% year over year. The playoffs averaged 5.3 million viewers across all rounds. So this wasn't just a final spike. The NBA had a genuinely strong season leading into it.
New media rights deal doing its thing.
Exactly. And that's the broader context for AEW. They're not just competing with the NBA Finals in isolation. They're competing with a version of the NBA that is more widely distributed and more watched than it's been in decades.
Okay, so here's something I want to get your take on. The June 13 episode was called the Summer Blockbuster Special. It was a 2.5-hour taped show. Was scheduling a taped special on the same night as a potential NBA championship game a mistake?
That's a fair question. The NBA Finals schedule isn't always predictable. You don't know in advance if there's going to be a Game 5 or if the series will go longer. But the finals were already at Game 5 by June 13, so there was some visibility into the competition. Whether AEW had flexibility to adjust the taping or the air date is a different question.
And the taped versus live element, does that factor into how AEW promotes the show? Like, if fans know it's taped, does that reduce urgency?
It can. Results from taped shows sometimes leak online before they air, which reduces the must-watch now feeling. And when you're competing against something as live and unpredictable as a championship game, that urgency gap becomes even more pronounced.
So when you step back from all of this, the 364,000 number, the 24.5 million NBA audience, the missing HBO Max data, the Nielsen methodology changes, what does this moment actually tell us about the state of wrestling on TV?
I think it tells us a few things. First, live sports remain the dominant force in linear television, and when they're historic, they're essentially unmovable. Second, wrestling's Saturday night position is genuinely vulnerable during playoff and final season. That's not a new insight, but June 13 is the starkest illustration of it in recent memory.
And third,
and this is the one I keep coming back to, the traditional TV number is increasingly an incomplete picture. Collision was on HBO Max simultaneously. Those viewers aren't counted. In a world where streaming is how a lot of people watch, judging a show purely by its cable rating is like judging a restaurant by how many people ate in the dining room while ignoring all the takeout orders.
that's a really good way to frame it. The cable number is real, but it's not the whole story.
And until HBO Max releases those streaming numbers, which they haven't, as of the reporting available, we genuinely don't know the full audience for that June 13 episode. The 364,000 is the floor, not necessarily the ceiling.
Here's what this really comes down to, I think. June 13, 2026 was a night where two very different kinds of television events collided, literally. A taped wrestling special and a historic NBA championship game. And the numbers reflect exactly what you'd expect when those two things go head to head.
Right. And the 364,000 number is real, and it matters. But it exists inside a context that includes a once-in-a-generation sports moment, a measurement system that's still being calibrated, and a streaming audience that nobody has counted yet. All of those things are true at the same time.
The Knicks hadn't won since 1973, the NBA Finals hadn't drawn these numbers since 1998, and Collision hadn't faced competition quite like this in its recent history. Everything about June 13 was extreme.
And that's actually the most important thing to hold on to. When F4W10N called sports competition a familiar refrain for Collision back in April, they were describing a pattern. But June 13 wasn't just the pattern, it was the pattern at maximum intensity. The NBA Finals, peaking at 33 million viewers, is not a normal Saturday night.
So the question going forward isn't really about June 13 specifically. It's about whether AEW can find a way to protect Collision's audience during playoff season, or whether this is just the cost of doing business on Saturday nights.
That's exactly the right question. And the HBO Max simulcast is part of the answer. It gives viewers a streaming option. But until those numbers are transparent and public, it's hard to know how much of the audience is actually being retained through that channel.
364,000 on TNT versus 24.5 million on ABC. That gap is almost incomprehensible.